All right, tips and tricks on budget repairs. That's what we'll be talking about today. The reason I'm making this video for the most part is you can buy these RC cars right here. This is the PX Toys 9300. You can buy these for pretty cheap, around $35 to $40, and they come up under different various names and they're rebranded, and you can find them on Banggood, you can find them on Amazon. But if you find this platform, it's cheap. Issue is you can't always find parts, and smaller parts. What sucks about these is these C-hubs over here. This is the one that I broke. I've already fixed it, and I'll explain to you how I did that later as we get further into this. But these budget RC cars in general, they just have small, dainty little pieces, arms, and though they can get up to 30, 40 miles an hour, depending on how you gear them and set them up, they're really not meant to take a crash at that speed, so they're a little bit fragile. And as you know, finding parts for these is not only difficult and sometimes expensive between shipping, but the parts don't last that long either. So what are you to do? Well, I turn to these four things right here. We have a soldering iron, which you'll need for electronics anyways. It's a good skill to have to be able to solder your wires, especially if you're going to be getting into RCing. But I mainly, in terms of repairs, use this for welding plastic back together. I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go into it, but yeah, so soldering iron, and then we have regular super glue that you can buy just at the dollar store. We have this stuff called Steel Stick by JB Weld. Though you can use the Gorilla Glue putty, you can use any other JB Weld putty. This is just the strongest one I found, which I find to work the best. I think it has the highest PSI rating, and that translates to me having to use less of this material and getting a stronger hold. Lastly, I have the actual Gorilla glue itself, epoxy bond. It is my favorite epoxy glue. Now, if I want something to stick together quickly at a low to medium strength, I use this. But if I want a high strength adhesive to stick together plastic pieces or whatever else may have been damaged, I go to this. If this doesn't hold up, then I go with different strategies. But it's rare that I've had this fail on me. This has worked for me almost every single time. All right. So what broke on this RC and what I have already repaired, but we'll be explaining, is the C-hub. Now, I'm not actually sure what this is called. This is the receiving end to the C-hub, but this itself is the C-hub, you know? This connects right here, and this piece right here connects to the steering rod, so it can turn like this, you know, when it's in here. When I crashed it, I broke this poor thing from here and from here. So I broke both these ends off, so there was no way to, you know, really connect it back without having to repair these fractures. So yeah, the tough thing and what I've used to fix it is the Gorilla Glue. And it looks like it's wet, but this is actually how the glue dries. The interesting thing about this Gorilla Glue is that it expands 3 to 4 times in the curing process. And it will make a hard bond within 1 to 2 hours, but it doesn't cure for a whole 24. So this has been glued together for about 3 hours now. And it feels pretty solid and sturdy. I'm just pushing down on it. It seems pretty good at the moment, but it's still not fully cured, so I'm not going to give it a full on test yet. I'm not going to hit any jumps with it at the moment. I'm just going to let it cure. But you can see when these plastic pieces break, they break very not even clean, but you can almost always fit them back together in a definitive way. It doesn't feel like the match is off. They always break in a particular way. So you're always able to fit them back together. Now, you're gonna have to read the instructions on the actual Gorilla Glue if you choose to do something like this. But in short, once you put the glue on, in a perfect world, you're supposed to have these clamped. Now, this was too small for me to clamp, and it's broken at this kind of diagonal joint over here. So clamping this would have been pretty hard for me. And same issue over here. I used less glue. I used less glue on this side, as you can see, but you're actually not supposed to use too much because of how this glue expands, as you can see right there. Alright, so that worked really well. And I'll even give you a speed run and some videos of bashing with these parts put back in the car, so you can kind of see that it does work and it's not nonsense. But that kind of covers the Gorilla Glue part. I like to use it for these kind of applications or anything else where you can get the plastic piece to click back into where it broke in from with a good fit, and then you can just leave it there overnight and that'll do a good job. Now, what I like to use steel stick here for, and I'll show you where I've done in the past. See right here, I used that to put the bulk head together one time. And I know what you're thinking how good could it be since it just broke, since I've clearly had to use Gorilla Glue to fix it where I broke it from yesterday. But it had held up for a good 4 or 5 months. And you could buy the replacement pieces to these, but not only do they take weeks to show up and make you buy minimums at times, they also just break again, unfortunately. So I had to figure out a cheaper way to do these. So that's currently what I'm doing. I'll use these for any kind of reinforcement after I've glued, and then sometimes I'll glue it after the fact, or I will use this for reinforcing. Now there's, here, I can show you the wild range of applications that I've used this year's steel stick on. So you can actually see on this other model here of the PX Toys 9300 that I had previously broken a C-hub on this. It's a very common break-in part, and it's more than likely going to be the first thing that you break on this RC, you know, if and when you get it. But you can see I've reconstructed a portion of it, and just for reference, you know, this is what it's supposed to look like, and this arm right here is what connects into the steering rod, so when the servo turns, it can turn like this. Now, it broke on this car here, and I had made another one out of putty, out of the steel stick. And cool thing is, it's drillable, it's threadable. All I did was apply this here, get a nice thick piece going to fabricate my own extension of this plastic piece here, and I drilled down after about an hour, and I inserted this in. This also takes 24 hours to cure, but it becomes hard and solid, and you can work on it within maybe an hour of it. So it does work rather well, and I've had this for about a month and a half now, and I've had no issues. Now, yesterday when it took the tumble and pieces broke off this RC, this held up fine, and it was definitely subjected to some stress and strain from the spill. Another good thing that steel stick is good for is for reinforcing. Let me show you what I've done on my other RCs. Alright, so here's another set of 2 RCs that I have that are also the same platform. This is a XLF03. I'm not really sure who the manufacturers are. Just like the other RCs, they have a ton of different variations and brandings, but essentially the same platform. I'm mainly showing you this so I can show you how I've used the steel stick to reinforce some of the knuckles. Now, this one on the left, stock, original, and you can see how the knuckles are. They look solid. It is metal, but the second you take these out and you get to anything over 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour, if you hit a sidewalk, a curb, just anything in sideways momentum, this is gonna break. For some reason, they just break all the way around through the center. And I need something a little bit more permanent. But as you can tell, this is what I've had to do. So what I'll do now is when I get these RCs, or if I have any that aren't damaged, right when it's new, I will putty right over it. Leave a big old glob of this putty, wrap around to the inside of the knuckle itself, so it kind of like curves in. Yeah, kind of like curves in that way. Then you have to shape it a little bit so the wheels can move and nothing's interfering with the movement of your tire. But I've done that to all 4 of these. I have taken it to skate parks. The dog has just chewed, clamped down right on the top, choosing the tires, and that's why this RC is dirty. And it will always be dirty. I will never clean this because it's gonna get dirty less than 24 hours later. This brush is set up, this thing pulls around 45, 50 miles an hour, and on grass right around 40, so it is a fun battle, and she wins frequently. That is essentially what I use the JB steel stick, JB Weld steel stick for in terms of reinforcing and how I use it. All right, so hopefully that gave you enough insight into how to use the steel stick and what it's good for, really. You know, what its purpose is, applications you can use it for, and, you know, get creative. I'm sure there's 100,000 different ways to use it that I'm not even thinking of. Those are just the scenarios which I have run through so far and what I've had to use it for. Now, here's the last part that I want to go into. This is actual plastic welding, and this isn't just a product. This does require probably the most skill out of the few ways that I've just showed you. By the way, I'm not really going to bother explaining what to do with the super glue, the little super glue right there. I'm going to just assume everybody knows how to use that. But yeah, plastic welding. So this one has a little bit of a learning curve. I'm going to try to prop this up and do a plastic weld for you while I fix. You can see it right here. There's a screw. See if I can get my finger on it just in case anybody really doesn't feel like focusing. There we go, right there, this plastic screw. This piece will pop out the second this thing flips over. It will break. I did put some super glue in there, looks like, so that's why it's not popping out right now. But I'm gonna just take some plastic and melt it and weld it right over this piece right here. And there's some nuances to it, so I'll explain those. Alright, so for this last segment, I'm going to try to show you actually how to weld the plastic into place. So what I like to do is I keep some plastic scraps around, and I keep the plastic scraps around that break off my RCs, or old chassis, or old steering rods, arms, pieces of old plastic shocks. And I do that because I know they're using a certain type of plastic, which all plastics have different composition. Some are more brittle, some are a little bit more flexible, but these RC plastics, though they have different qualities within them, I know it's going to be better than if I were to use like really crappy plastic. Like, let's say I would never use the plastic from the body of this pen here. This is going to be really brittle, it's not going to be a good quality plastic. Find a better piece of plastic if you're going to weld with it. Now, other thing is, on your actual soldering iron, you want to have a couple of different tips. Now, if you've been soldering for a while, or you already have a soldering iron and you have old tips lying around, use those old tips for plastic. You do not want to use good tips because they gunk up the tip. So I am already heated up with my iron. You can see the tip of my soldering iron is kind of lead looking. This is not what the tip should look like normally. Other thing you want to know that's really important when you're welding plastic is make sure you have a fan on and the fumes are not going to your face, as plastic vapor is toxic. And the other thing that I've noticed is you're gonna have to play around with the temperature a little bit. Usually I do most of my soldering between 680 and 750 degrees, but for plastic I tend to stay in the mid to high 800s. So I'm gonna do my best here to do this for you because I am working in kind of a tight space. I'm gonna have to come in from a weird angle. Now, I'm gonna take this, run my iron on it, and you see it's starting to goop. This plastic's starting to melt. I'm just gonna do this and take a gop off of here because it's gonna help me get in there without having to have the rest of this piece. There we go. Alright, so part one, getting the plastic on there, done. He's gopped on. Now I'm going to start slowly working this plastic. You really want to do your best to press out that air. And other thing that's important to realize is that you really need to melt the new plastic that you're joining into the old plastic. So you're gonna have to melt kind of around the perimeter of where you're joining. There you go. And then after you've melted it, you can kind of run over, smooth it. And there we go. We now have a beautiful join. And even on this, I could have done it way better. I'm just working with a really tight space here with the camera set up and the mount for the camera holding it. But now, as you can see, this joint all the way around, grouped on, melted back in. If I really wanted to, I would go back in over here and melt this piece in here, but I just don't care that much, and the glue was holding on good enough. So between that and this, I think we should be in a pretty good spot. Yeah. If you ever have to do this for aesthetic purposes, you can easily sand this down and get the look that you're looking for, paint over it or sticker over it, whatever. I just don't really care. Alright, so all in all, I hope that was an informative video for you guys, and I hope you're able to use some of these skills on your RCs to save you money, or use them for any other thing that you need in life. The plastic welding is plastic welding. Join any plastic anywhere. Just keep in mind that you're using similar quality plastics. What did they say? The saying is, the skills are transferable, right? So, yeah, leave a comment, like, whatever.